Day 17 of the war with Hamas. Reports indicate that the IDF is ready and poised for its mission to end terrorist rule in Gaza. They now only await orders to move forward from the Security Cabinet, as the daily efforts have to do international efforts to free the hostages. And the third convoy of trucks reportedly entered the Rafah crossing on its way to the Gaza Strip with humanitarian aid. And Al-TV's Steve Leibovich reports.
Israeli media is widely speculating that Prime Minister Netanyahu and the War Cabinet are allowing a period of time ahead of the order to invade Gaza to give an opportunity to U.S.-led efforts to secure the release of some 200 Israeli hostages held by terrorists in Gaza. U.S. President Biden convened a virtual meeting with leaders from Canada, France, Germany, Italy, and Britain to underscore their support for Israel and its right to defend itself. At the same time, Israel's allies urged the adherence to international humanitarian law and protection of civilians. In a joint statement, they also called for the immediate release of all remaining hostages. Overnight, an IDF soldier was killed and 3 others wounded by a Hamas anti-tank guided missile fired at an Israeli tank and engineering vehicle. Troops responded by shelling the terror cell.
צה"ל פשטו היום בשטח עזה, סמוך לגבול, כחלק ממאמץ להכנת המרחב לקראת תקיפה ובהמשך האיסוף של מידע בנוגע לנעדרים ולחטופים. משימה לאומית ראשונה במעלה.
The attack came as the military continued airstrikes in the northern part of the Gaza Strip to ensure a safer entry for forces during an expected ground offensive aimed at toppling Hamas. The army said it killed dozens of Hamas members in airstrikes in Gaza, including the deputy commander of Hamas rocket array. Israel continues to allow humanitarian aid into southern Gaza. A further 15 aid trucks carrying food, water, and medicine passed the Rafah border crossing from Egypt. Yesterday, a man was seriously wounded as a result of rocket impact in the southern city of Netivot. But overnight, there was no rocket fire into Israel for the first time since October 7th. Rocket fire renewed late this morning. Hamas rocket firing abilities have been sharply reduced. Since October 7th, the terror group has fired more than 7,400 rockets into Israel. The Iron Dome intercepted over 1,100 of these rockets. Many fell in open areas, 550 misfired and fell inside Gaza, and more than 400 caused damage in Israel.
Day 17 of the Swords of Iron War. And to put things in order, we're now joined by former member of Knesset and former Yamam commander, David Tzur. David, what can you tell us about reports that the ground offensive into Gaza is delayed by international efforts, to secure the release of the hostages?
Well, I can't tell you a lot about it. This is one of the speculations. We can understand that there is a lot of preparation going on. You see the airstrikes, which are very effective, because we need them in order to neutralize any kind of resistance, booby traps. We know Gaza very well. We know that they are preparing for a ground invasion, but we will do it. I mean, it's necessary, and the rushing into that, it's not reasonable. It's better to prepare and to do it on the right timing, but we will have to decide when is good timing.
David, the army is said to be fully ready for the mission at hand to bring an end to Hamas rule in Gaza. We're told it's going to be a long war. I mean, we're already on day 17 and Israel has yet to enter Gaza. How long can we wait? Reserves are waiting. Soldiers are over there for like 2 weeks already.
Well, that's going to be a long war. It's not like what we saw before. After what happened in the 7th of October, we're in different ball. We need to eliminate any military force and government of this Hamas ISIS, and it takes time because it's a urban area. We are not like those who are criticizing us, very sensitive for civilian life. You see that we're trying very hard to convince the civilian to go to the south, because we need clean area from civilians. So the fighting which will take there is military against those terrorists and not civilians. So as much as we need, it will take time. We're talking about months. So it's not something which makes very much difference if we will start it in a week or in an hour.
Of course, definitely. I mean, you know, something else we're hearing commentators remind us that there was a 3-week buildup on the borders ahead of the Six-Day War in '67. Then we captured the Golan from Syria, Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem from Jordan, and Sinai and Gaza from Egypt. Why will a war with Hamas in Gaza need more than 6 days?
Yeah, well, it's a different war, it's different times, because surprise strike is not an issue here. Israel doesn't have any, let's say, interest to start with the north area, to go against the Hezbollah now. Definitely we will need to take care of it, this threat. This threat is much more, 10 times more maybe from the Hamas. But there are different points with Hezbollah, because Hezbollah is part of the interest of a legitimate country and state. So definitely it's something to be taken care. We are glad that we have the allies, American coalition, which is also with Europe and other countries. This is something which definitely will have to neutralize this threat from the north. So we need to concentrate on the south. There are no surprises, not for Hamas and also not for us. So it's different from 60 days war, but we will need a windows of opportunity. Definitely for the hostage, it's an issue. If this is high priority, I don't want to go into tactical thinking, but definitely this is a high priority. But if we need to go into put on the ground, it's not going to be the main obstacle to do it.
David, we're praying for the return of our hostages and safe return of our soldiers. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Yes, the IDF has been going on the offensive in its ongoing clashes with Hezbollah on the northern border. Prime Minister Netanyahu visited the northern border and warned of the potential destruction of Lebanon. Meanwhile, evacuation efforts from the city of Kiryat Shmona and over 20 other border communities are continuing. And Al-TV's Steve Leibovich has more.
The IDF hit 2 Hezbollah anti-tank units before they could attack. The army says one of the cells in the Mount Dov area planned to launch rockets, and the second cell near the northern town of Matat planned to launch an anti-tank guided missile. The army targeted 7 Hezbollah cells during a 24-hour period. Prime Minister Netanyahu met with officers on the northern front. He explained that the goal in the north was to block Hezbollah attacks while focusing on the mission to eliminate Hamas in Gaza.
ואנחנו עכשיו בקרב כפול. קרב אחד זה קרב לבלום כאן, והצד השני לנצח שם. ניצחון מוחץ שמוחק את החמאס.
Netanyahu also issued a clear warning of what could happen to Lebanon.
אני לא יכול להגיד לכם כרגע אם חיזבאללה יחליט להיכנס בצורה מלאה למלחמה. אם חיזבאללה יחליט להיכנס למלחמה, הוא יתגעגע למלחמת לבנון השנייה. הוא יעשה את טעות חייו. ואנחנו נכה בו בעוצמה שהוא לא יכול אפילו לדמיין. והמשמעות לו ולמדינת לבנון היא הרסנית.
Meanwhile, the evacuation from northern communities is continuing. The evacuation of the city of Kiryat Shmona has reportedly been going more slowly than planned. Efforts are still underway to find solutions for thousands of residents of the northern city.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple.
President Herzog revealed in an interview with Sky News that Hamas had planned to use cyanide against Israeli civilians on October 7th. The president also met family members of Israelis held hostage in Gaza and gave assurances that Israel is using maximum efforts to bring them home. And Al-TV's Devo Klein reports.
In an interview with Sky News, Herzog showed materials recovered from a USB drive on the body of a Hamas terrorist in Israel, which was copied from Al-Qaeda and included detailed instructions on creating chemical weapons with precise instructions for preparing a device for dispersing cyanide agents.
This is material which was found on the body of one of those sadistic villains. It's Al-Qaeda material, official Al-Qaeda material. We're dealing with ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Hamas. This is what we're dealing with.
Last night, Herzog met with families of many of the 200-plus hostages held currently in Gaza and assured them that Israel is doing everything it can to bring them home. Some 80 families were represented at the 90-minute meeting, where the president told them, "We want to bring your loved ones home soon. That's the challenge."
First of all, he showed us support, and he showed us and told us that the Israeli government is doing everything in their power to get our loved ones back. And secondly, it was very important for him to hear our stories, to get to know our loved ones.
The hostages have been held in Gaza for over 17 days. Some are elderly or frail and need medication. To date, the International Red Cross has been unable to visit, receive information, or deliver medication to the hostages, and family members continue issuing desperate pleas to the world for help.
We're asking for everybody around the world, Sarei Chutz, foreign ministers from the 30 countries where there are hostages, to scream, let in the medical care. We've talked to doctors. The doctors have said, if he gets the treatment that he needs, he has a decent chance. If he still hasn't gotten it, it's a dire situation. He needs surgery. He needs
Antibiotics.
intensive antibiotics. And we're screaming to anybody who will listen, let in the medical care and bring all 200 of these people home to their families.
China has entered the growing tensions in the Middle East, deploying a significant naval presence as a deterrent against American forces. However, officials in the security system and experts in the civilian sector are unanimous that China will not intervene in any case. The Chinese Ministry of Defense made an official announcement on Sunday, revealing that they are dispatching 6 warships to patrol the Middle East. This decision is seen as a direct response to the United States' significant military buildup near Israel. Currently, Chinese warships are actively patrolling the Persian Gulf, and just last week they engaged in a joint military exercise with Omani armed forces. Both security officials and civilian experts are in complete agreement that Chinese military intervention, whether it's through their navy or other means, is highly unlikely, even in the event of a northern expansion of the conflict, involving not just Hezbollah, but also other components of the radical Shiite axis, which includes Iran. This assessment is based on several facts. The first is that there are 2 Chinese naval task forces currently in the region, one in the Indian Ocean south of Iran and the other off the coast of Somalia and Africa. Both are small in scope and have very limited firepower, certainly compared to the U.S. task forces in the area. Moreover, the administration of Chinese leader Xi Jinping, like the administrations of his predecessors, has religiously avoided direct involvement in the conflicts that do not directly concern the interest of national sovereignty and major economic interests of the People's Republic of China. And now everyone seems to have an opinion, and the world isn't staying silent as large pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian protests are taking place in the largest European capitals. And Al-TV's William Sharon has more.
These atrocities should never be forgotten. The hostages should be brought home now.
In a massive demonstration at London's Trafalgar Square, 20,000 people united to call for the release of the Israeli hostages in Gaza. Tears flowed from the crowd as the hostages' names were read out loud. This rally followed a pro-Palestinian demonstration the day before, where an estimated 100,000 participants marched through London's city centre. In Germany, at the ceremonial inauguration of the Weil Synagogue in Dessau-Rosslau, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz retaliated the need for a collective effort to combat anti-Semitism and protect Jewish life in Germany.
Jetzt gilt es, meine Damen und Herren. Jetzt muss ich zeigen, was nie wieder bedeutet. Jetzt müssen wir zeigen, was unser nie wieder bedeutet. Deshalb wird unser Staat jüdisches Leben überall und zu jeder Zeit schützen und verteidigen.
In Berlin, near the Brandenburg Gate, a solidarity rally was addressed by German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier, where approximately 300 people gathered at central Potsdam Square. Both Germany and France are home to the European Union's largest Jewish and Muslim communities. The governments of these countries have imposed restrictions on pro-Palestinian groups following the October 7th Hamas attack, with the aim of preventing public disorder and combating anti-Semitism. Still, the first pro-Palestinian demonstration allowed by police in Paris since the Hamas attack took place. Around 15,000 people congregated at the Place de la République in solidarity with Palestinians, calling for a ceasefire. France's highest administrative court recently ruled the pro-Palestinian protests should be banned on a case-by-case basis, overturning the earlier blanket ban suggested by the France Interior Minister.
We're getting to know many organizations these days doing incredible work in different fields, and one of them is Tzalash, in short, giving spiritual and emotional support for religious soldiers and their families, which is super important these days. And joining me now in studio is Tzalash Managing Director, Rabbi David Gottlieb. David, hi. Great having you here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
How are you doing?
Okay, as can be expected under the circumstances.
Of course. Now, before we dive into what you guys are doing during the war, what is Tzalash? What does it actually mean? And really, what do you do in everyday life?
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity. Tzalash is a Roshei Tevot, or an acronym, Tzadik Lamed Shin, Tzava L'Shem Shamayim. That in Hebrew basically means the army for the sake of heaven, which more colloquially I could explain means that we are an organization which is dedicated to the religious and emotional support of the soldiers. Many of the soldiers, a high percentage of the established Israeli army, come from religious homes. And we aim to work in concert with the army to provide them religious support so that they can be the best soldiers that they can be, but at the same time not compromising their religious commitment. Similarly, soldiers have emotional challenges. It's a very demanding work, even not at wartime. So we provide counseling and support for them. And lastly, we have an additional division called Eshet Chayil, which is a division which refers to the women of valor. And that alludes to the wives of the soldiers. And even before the war, we had over 350 married couples where the husband is serving full-time in the army. And we provide various forms of emotional support, religious support for their wives who have a very difficult situation where a week or two at a time, their husband is out of the house doing demanding or even dangerous job. And therefore, we are there for them, their families, and for the soldiers themselves, religious and emotional support.
Wow, that's a beautiful idea. Now, do you know the numbers, perhaps? Like, what numbers are we talking about? Because, you know, religious soldiers in the army, very specific. Do you know the numbers?
It's a good question. I'm hesitant to give an exact number only because how do you define religious? Masorti, not Masorti, this religious, that religious. I believe it may be as much as a third of the army. I don't know the numbers in the Miluim, in the reserves, but in the current serving army, a very high percentage of religious Jews, primarily from the religious Zionist community, but also we're seeing now even more and more from the Haredi community, but certainly from the religious Zionist community, a very high percentage are serving, and I believe it may be up to a third of the entire army.
We also see many want to draft. We saw it just this morning. Now, David, a little bit about your story. You made an aliyah in your mid-30s. I mean, is that right?
Yes, correct.
And how did you get to be involved in sort of like an army organization for the soldiers? How did you get into that world, actually?
That's a very good question. And the answer is very simply, my oldest son. He went to a Hesder yeshiva. That's a yeshiva, a rabbinical seminary, you could call it, a religious yeshiva, which combines studying religious texts, religious items in yeshiva, and serving in the army. And when he went into the army as a family of Olim, as you said, I didn't serve in the army, obviously. We came to Israel when I was in my mid-30s. And you know that it's a little bit dangerous. You are worried for your child's physical safety.
From abroad, everything looks like bigger
Exactly.
and crazier.
But when you finally have someone who goes into the army, you realize it's not so simple to be religious. Not because the army is antagonistic, God forbid. They try to be as supportive as possible. But simply the demands of the army, which are incredible, the amount of time and effort, the exhaustion of the soldiers, even without war. It's very hard to maintain a regular schedule of prayer and of Torah study. And I saw the challenge of my son. And my son introduced me to Tzalash because he benefited a lot from their services. So like any parent who had gratitude, hakarat hatov, I started volunteering to help Tzalash. And when my son was already almost out of the army, the founder of Tzalash, Rabbi Peretz Einhorn, approached me and he encouraged me to join and become his partner in the Menahel or the managing director. So we got to it beautifully, yes, through my son's service. And now even though my son was out of the army, now he's back in reserves. He was drafted on Simchat Torah like so many. But I got to it through my son and having hakarat hatov, gratitude for what they were doing. And I saw the challenge, but that Tzalash knows how to answer the challenge.
Yes, amazing. Now we're 2 weeks into the war. You're saying your son is also there in reserves. What is Tzalash doing to help during these difficult times? And also, if you want to help you, donate, do something for Tzalash, what can we do and how can we do it?
So thank you for asking. So obviously, the second the war began after Simchat Torah, we mobilized. Now we were challenged because many of the male staff members, other than me, virtually, were also called up. Most of our staff is now in reserves and on the front lines. Many of the women who I work with, their husbands or their sons are now also on the front lines. So on the one hand, we have a skeletal staff. On the other hand, demands are incredible. So now there are thousands and thousands of extra new soldiers who we're trying to help. And we have, I mentioned 350 women that we were helping. In the first day, we had 2,500 women who signed up for our services, now over 4,000. So we are doing, broadly speaking, two things. Number one is we are trying as much as possible, I myself, but not only me, visiting as many army bases as possible, not only to give emotional support, but also bringing huge backpacks that weigh over 40 pounds filled with holy books, tefillin, Torah, Sidurim, prayer books, psalm books, Tehillim, tzitziot, filled to give them out to the various units.
Many people are going back to these days. We're seeing also non-religious people.
Yes, it's incredible. Part of the mission of Tzalash is we don't coerce, we don't force. So we're there for the religious soldiers, but what we're finding in the war more than we ever had in our history is people who might not identify as religious, but they want a Tehillim. They want tzitzit. I've put tefillin on people who never put on tefillin before. Not because I pushed, but because they asked.
People want it.
Yes.
Now we really want to get it in really quickly. How can we really donate? How can we help Tzalash to help
Thank you. Yes, so we're helping these 4,000 women. We're also helping the soldiers. And if they would like, we would be happy if they could join. I know there's going to be a QR code on the screen. And we have a special campaign to help the emotional support we're giving for the women who are not behind the scenes, but they're very important and have a difficult time, as well as all these packages and gifts and visits that we're making to the soldiers on the front line. They can visit our website, tzalash.org, and they can follow the QR code to the special campaign for this emergency campaign for the war.
David, you have an amazing initiative, an amazing organization. Tzalash, thank you so much for joining us today. Stay safe during these times. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, and you should stay safe as well.
Thank you so much. And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Mostly clear skies and cool temperatures are expected tonight with lows of around 20 degrees Celsius or 67 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, mostly sunny conditions alongside steady top temperatures set to reach highs of 30 degrees Celsius or 86 degrees Fahrenheit. More than 1,400 babies, children, elderly men, women, soldiers were murdered in cold blood by Hamas terrorists on October 7. The scale of tragedy is so large that we cannot mention every name right now, but we will slowly share their stories and ensure their memories live on. More than 1,400 lives senselessly lost, hundreds of Israelis still unaccounted for, and dozens still being held hostage in Gaza. Not a single Israeli is not impacted by the horrific events of October 7. Today, all of Israel mourns. And that's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our Al-TV channel, subscribe to our Al-TV newsletter, and of course, do not forget to check out our new and improved website, ILTV.tv, with all of the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm Amit Harari. Stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.